The most painful part isn't that he cheated, it's that he understood everything only after losing her. What makes this story brutal is not the affair, it's the timing. Damien only wakes up after he sends the photo, after Clara leaves, after the penthouse goes silent, after the wedding ring is sitting there like a verdict. And Clara? She doesn't win because she hurts him back. She wins because she walks away. That's the twist that hits hardest. The man who ruled an empire through fear ends up completely powerless in front of an empty room, a handwritten note, and the absence of the only person who ever truly loved him.
And so our story begins with an architect of fear, a man watching his kingdom incinerate from a single arrogant flame. This man, Damien Vale, had built a fortress of wealth that appeared invulnerable. His undoing was not an enemy's blade, but a simple image sent to his expecting wife. He was a king without rivals, yet this one digital sin consumed the only treasure his money could never secure, a perfect, self-inflicted wound. From his residence on the 47th floor, the city's lights were not a view. They were a conquered map of souls. Each point of light below was a life either in his debt or in his service. The apartment was a cold cathedral built to commerce, where faint light danced on sterile Italian marble. The furniture held more value than an ordinary man's entire life. The art whispered tales of its dubious acquisition, and at the center of this gilded cage sat Clara Vale, 7 months into carrying his heir. She folded infant's clothing with a hollow mechanical grace, a ritual in a life that had lost its purpose. Her hands just moved, smoothing tiny garments that felt like promises she already knew were destined to break. Down the corridor, a nursery stood complete but devoid of warmth. Its costly gray walls exuded a chilling silence. An empty crib waited like a ghost under a motionless mobile. The room was a vacuum, waiting for a life born from a marriage Clara knew was a lie. Her eyes settled on the dining table, set for 2, her nightly theater of denial. 2 plates, 2 glasses, and napkins folded into the severe triangles Damien required. It was 7:43 p.m. He had said 7. Traffic, she told herself, another flimsy shield against the encroaching night. She wove the familiar tale of a meeting that ran late, the empty words a practice script for the last 8 months. Every lie was simpler to speak but heavier to bear. A sudden, sharp kick from within stole her breath and drew a faint smile to her lips. She placed a hand there, feeling the stir of the small life inside. "I know," she whispered. "I feel his absence, too." And that was the deepest cruelty of her vigil. The ache for him was immense, not for the Titan who made their home a cold hotel, but for the man he was before ambition devoured him. She missed Daniel. That was the name he carried when they met, before he became the chilling figure known as Damien. She remembered Sunday mornings with his awful scrambled eggs, which his pride forced her to finish. She yearned for the nights their limbs were tangled, his hand a firm anchor on her hip, his breathing a quiet rhythm of safety. She missed being his entire world. Now she was an asset on his ledger, housed in splendor, while he forged his own legend. Clara set down a yellow onesie decorated with elephants and rose, her body heavy. Her balance was unsteady, her form at once a miracle and a stranger to her. She was a mere silhouette against the skyline Damien believed he commanded. Out in that electric blaze, he was closing deals and crushing foes, becoming more of a myth and less of the husband she needed. The baby kicked again, with more force. "Shh," Clara murmured, rubbing her belly in slow circles. "He will be home. He always comes home." The words were an empty prayer. What did home mean to a man who had made himself a god? Across town, in a restaurant with a 6-month wait list, Damien Vale was proving her right. He held court in a private room, under light that forgave all flaws, with wine that cost a weekly wage. His companion, however, was not his wife. Sienna Crow wore her beauty as a weapon. She had sharp features, eyes that held a look of predatory amusement, and lips the color of fresh blood. Her presence was a controlled chaos that made wise men fools and powerful men gamblers. Tonight, Damien was both. "Tell me," she said, her voice a low purr as she swirled her wine, "do you ever return to that fortress? Or is she just another acquisition to prove you can afford one?" Damien laughed. It was a hollow, rehearsed sound, a defense against a comment that struck too true. "I go home." "When?" "In the lulls between corporate assassinations?" Sienna leaned forward, her smile sharp and dangerous. "I have known you 4 months, Damien. You have spoken of your wife twice, your penthouse 5 times, your empire constantly. What does this information suggest?" "It suggests I am a focused man. It suggests you are dying of boredom." The word cracked the air, fracturing his cool exterior. He reached for the expensive Bordeaux, a bottle presented like a relic, and took a crude swallow it did not deserve. "Clara is pregnant," he stated, as if this fact were a final winning argument. 7 months along. It is a delicate time. All situations become delicate when one is caught out of bounds. Sienna's eyes were chips of ice. "Tell me of her. This wife you keep in the shadows." Damien shifted, the fine chair groaning under his weight. The question was a minefield. "She is a good woman. Kind. She will make an incredible mother." "How touching!" The sarcasm in her voice could etch glass. "Good and kind, the words one uses for a pet. That is not—" His words caught in a locked jaw. "You don't know her. I don't have to. I know you." Sienna placed her glass down, her gaze fixed on him. A predator poised to strike. "You have fashioned yourself into a force of nature, Damien. You command allegiance. You inspire terror. Men twice your age submit to you, and then you return home to a woman who what? Arranges your closet, awaits you in silence, asks about your day." Each question was a precise incision, exposing a reality he chose to ignore. The truth was he was a specter in Clara's life. He had no idea if she was content or desolate, or merely marking time until the baby arrived to fill the space he had abandoned. "She chose this life," he offered, his voice thin. "Did she?" Sienna tilted her head. "Or did she choose a man who no longer exists?" The room suddenly felt airless. Damien tugged at the collar of his impeccable Tom Ford shirt and signaled for more wine he did not want. "What is the point of this inquisition?" he snapped. "My motive is simple curiosity." Sienna's smile was all teeth. "I want to discover if the great Damien Vale is truly impervious, or if there is a flicker of guilt for the pregnant woman you have entombed in that tower." "I have not entombed her. She is given everything. Except you." The server's arrival with the wine was the only interruption. As the dark red filled his glass, Damien wondered when luxury had ceased to be a reward and became a sedative. "I provide for her," he said, after the waiter departed. "The home, the security, the finest doctors. She will never have a worry." "How incredibly noble." Sienna took a small, measured sip. "You have provided her a beautiful gold-plated prison." "It is not a prison. She is free to—" He stopped, confronted by the stark truth that he had no idea what Clara was free to do. Leave? She had never threatened it. Argue? She barely whispered a complaint. Ask for him? She had given up long ago. The silence that followed was a condemnation. "Do you want to hear my theory?" Sienna asked, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "I think you're terrified." "Of what?" of being ordinary, of choosing a throne over a family. You have told yourself that providing money is the same as being present, that the fear you manufacture is worth more than a woman's love. Her analysis hung in the air between them. Prove me wrong. Damien tried to summon the cold logic that won him boardrooms, but the words would not form. A hot wave of shame washed through him, followed by a burning hatred for the one who had lit the fuse. This is the truth, Sienna cut in. I am aware. Which is why you want to run, but you will not. Because that would mean going home, the one place you are desperate to avoid. Correct? He was. She was 100% correct. And her aim was perfect. The penthouse was not a home. It was a mausoleum he had built for himself, sleek and stylish, but utterly dead. In that cold museum, Clara was just one more acquisition. The perfect wife, a beautiful silent object in his fabricated reality. To face her was to face the abyss between the man he pretended to be and the hollow man he was. It meant questions he could not answer. It was easier to be here, numbing himself with alcohol and a woman who wanted nothing real. Another bottle? Sienna asked, her smile predatory. Damien simply nodded. At 8:30, a message illuminated Clara's phone. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. 6 words, a dismissal as cold and impersonal as a weather report. For a long moment, Clara simply gazed at the phone's luminous screen before turning it over, silencing it against the table. There should have been fire, a demand for what she was owed. Instead, only the familiar hollow ache of being forgotten returned. Her hands began a somber ritual on their own, folding tiny clothes for their baby. A faint flutter from deep within her, a kick that still felt like a secret miracle. She was nurturing a new soul in absolute solitude, bound to a man whose name she wore like an ill-fitting coat. Things will be better once you're here, she murmured to the curve of her stomach. He'll remember us. He will come home. The words were a fragile appeal to a cosmos that had long gone deaf, a whisper lost in the oppressive quiet. She considered calling her brother, Evan, who held a conviction that men obsessed with power were merely hiding from a profound terror. But to concede his point was to accept the ruin of her own judgment, a burden she was not yet strong enough to bear. And so she remained in her gilded cage, preparing for a child whose father was dissolving into a stranger on the other side of town. By 10 p.m., the liquor held Damien in a soft, intoxicating grip. He wasn't drunk, not yet, but the world's hard edges had blurred, and the notion of consequence seemed a problem for a different man. In that warm fog, Sienna's voice was a low melody, her provocation sounding like an invitation. They had abandoned the restaurant an hour ago, leaving the bill as an afterthought for people to whom money was an abstraction. Now they were in her loft apartment, another monument to expensive loneliness, where the city lights below bled into a beautiful broken mosaic. You're finally shedding that skin tonight, Sienna noted, draped across a leather couch, her wine glass held with a careless grace. Less rigid, it suits you. I'm relaxed, Damien countered. The word a transparent lie. This wasn't peace, it was surrender, a severing of the tethers to every single one of his duties. You're deserting, she corrected, the stronghold, the wife, the life you engineered so flawlessly. She placed her glass down, rising with the fluid deadliness of a predator. The only real question is, what are you running toward? She was closer now, her perfume a cloud of dark spice and illicit promises that coiled around him. He was near enough that to remain still was a conscious decision. "This is a terrible mistake," Damien heard himself say, though he did not retreat an inch. "The greatest ones always are." Sienna's palm rested on his chest, feeling like a brand searing the skin over his heart. "For months you've performed the role of the contented man, pretending a perfect home and a pregnant wife could ever be enough. But it's a lie, isn't it? You wouldn't be standing here if it were true." Her logic was a perfect, insidious poison, and it found its mark. He could see the snare, he understood her game, yet he did none of the things a loyal husband would do. He let himself dream of setting the whole performance ablaze, of letting the untouchable king fall just to be a man, flawed, impulsive, and real. "Damien," Sienna breathed, her lips just inches from his. "When was the last time you did anything simply for want? Not as a strategic play, not for the grand design, just for you." He had no answer. For 3 years, every move had been a cold calculation on a chessboard. Clara herself had been part of that strategy, her family's name the key that unlocked his legitimacy. When had he last made a choice that was his own? "Show me," she whispered into his ear. "Show me the man behind the performance. Remind me you can still be dangerous." "How?" The word was a raw fracture in the silence. Sienna drew back just far enough to meet his gaze, her own eyes alight with the challenge. "Let's immortalize this moment! Right here! Something tangible! Something that proves you are here by choice, not by obligation." A frantic rhythm hammered against his ribs. "That's incredibly risky." "I'm aware. That is the entire point." Her smile was sharp, a knowing, predatory curve. "Unless, of course, you're afraid." And there it was, the single provocation his ego could never allow him to ignore. His whole world was constructed upon the myth of his fearlessness. How could he retreat from a single photograph? "I'm not afraid," he declared. "Then prove it." Sienna produced her phone, pressing herself against him. "Smile like you feel it." She raised the camera. Damien saw their reflection, Sienna's fierce, untamed beauty beside his own face, flushed with wine and a ruinous impulse. They looked like collaborators in some breathtaking, epic crime. A sudden, brilliant flash. "Perfect," Sienna murmured, admiring the screen. "We look correct together. Dangerous together." He glanced over her shoulder and could not deny it. They looked intensely alive, not like two people playing a part. "Now send it to her," Sienna said, her voice impossibly casual. The suggestion landed in the quiet room like a detonation. "What?" "To your wife." Sienna faced him, her expression a masterful blend of amusement and exquisite cruelty. "Send her the photograph. Prove you are not a prisoner to guilt or fear or whatever conditioning forces you to act the part of the good husband." "That is madness." "No, it's truth." Her gaze held him captive. "You're attempting to live two separate lives. You want a real risk. Then take one. Abandon the act and make an actual choice." Damien's heart pounded. Every rational cell in his mind screamed that this was a cataclysm, an action that would shatter his world and utterly destroy Clara. But the alcohol burned like a fever in his veins, and Sienna's dare resonated with a dark, broken fragment of his soul. He had feigned happiness for months, feigned closeness with Clara. Perhaps the only authentic act left was a cruel one. Perhaps there was a kind of liberation in cruelty? His thumb hovered over Clara's name. "Unless you're scared." Sienna whispered once more. Damien Vale had built an empire by never ever backing down. He pressed send. The message disappeared with a faint chime, like a lock turning for the final time. For one spectacular, soaring moment, Damien felt like a god, untethered, omnipotent, and free. And then, the immense gravity of his action came crashing down upon him. "What have I?" he began, but Sienna was laughing, a sharp, victorious sound. "You really did it," she marveled, her eyes glittering. "The great Damien Vale embracing the chaos. I honestly never thought you had it in you." Damien stared at his phone, at the stark, single word. Delivered. Across the city, in a silent apartment, a bomb he had just set was about to detonate in the life of his pregnant wife. The sense of power he'd felt moments before soured into a profound physical nausea. "I have to." The thought dissolved in his throat. Explain? Words were useless now. Fix it? Some things could not be undone. Sienna's smile had shifted, softening into a look of almost clinical pity. "Welcome to your consequences, Damien. It seems being invincible doesn't grant you immunity from your own catastrophic errors." He looked at her then, truly saw her for the first time, not as a temptation, but as a reflection of his own deepest flaws, a truth his pride had allowed him to ignore. "I have to go," he said, already turning away. "To do what? Apologize?" Her voice pursued him. "You sent that, Damien. You can't unsend it. You can't mend what you just broke." He walked out, grabbing his coats away to the elevator, a cold dread rising within him that was utterly foreign to his typical icy control. Damien Vale was a man built on power, on being immovable, on the legend of his own perfection. This was a catastrophic fissure in that foundation. Inside the descending lift, time seemed to stretch and distort. He stared at his wife's name on his screen, trying to fabricate a lie that could possibly explain the image he had sent. An accident, a joke. Both were laughably implausible. The truth was just a sick need to push every boundary, to see if the flawless world he had built would actually shatter. In his attempt to become a god, he had forgotten a man's capacity for self-immolation. The elevator doors slid open to the street, where his driver waited, perfectly motionless like a sentinel. Inside the Mercedes, the familiar scent of rich leather felt suffocating, like the stale air of a sealed crypt. "Home," he uttered, the word a taste of ash on his tongue. Home was meant to be a sanctuary, a place of grace, two things he was certain he would not find in his penthouse on the 47th floor. Through the window, the city lights streaked into a swift, incoherent blur. He watched the city blur past, his mind drifting to the simpler lives other men lived, sharing dinners, telling stories, merely being present, customs he had always considered beneath him. His entire life was a monument to his own superiority. It was precisely that arrogance that had compelled him to send the ruinous photograph, a raw and brutal assertion of his own power. The 20-minute journey stretched into a lifetime. His phone remained inert, and the profound silence from his wife was a far greater torment than any furious text could have been. The night doorman, a familiar presence, greeted him with ordinary respect. "Good evening, Mr. Vale." But Damien could only manage a slight nod, his throat tight as he entered the private elevator to his domain. This penthouse was not just his monument, it was his cage, a 47-story silent scream. The doors opened onto a vast cavern of cold marble and stark modern art he had chosen 3 years before. The lights were on. "Clara!" He called out, but the immense silence simply devoured his voice. A table, set for two with a meal that was now cold, sat like an artifact from a life that had just been erased. The stillness of the apartment felt wrong, thick with a quiet that was anything but peaceful. This wasn't stillness. It was the profound vacuum left in the wake of a soul's departure. He spoke her name again, his voice straining against the void, but only silence answered. He began a desperate pilgrimage through the penthouse, his terror mounting with each vacant room he faced. In the main hall, a small, meticulously folded set of infants' clothes. The kitchen was a sterile, untouched portrait. The nursery stood empty, a stage for a play that would never begin. He paused before their bedroom. The bed was made with a chilling precision. Her nightstand, a barren surface, held no trace of her presence. The closet door hung ajar, revealing the vast emptiness where her world once lived. And there, resting on his pillow, lay a velvet box beside a single, crisply folded note. His hands trembled as he took the two offerings. Within the box rested Clara's wedding band, a circle of platinum and diamond from an era when he believed a month of his life was a worthy price. The note was penned on her elegant cream-colored stationery. Her script was unnervingly perfect, the lines drawn with a surgeon's calm. Damien, your message was received. The photograph you sent spoke with a clarity words never could. For 7 months, I waited for your return. I understand now you were already home, just not with me. I will not contest this. I am choosing peace for myself and our child. Her letter wasn't an assault. It was a final assessment. You have your empire. I pray it keeps you warm. My legal counsel will arrange all matters concerning our child. You may be a father, but my role as wife to a phantom is now concluded. Clara. He scanned the words repeatedly, but they refused to cohere into meaning. They were merely cold, immutable facts. Her detached, clinical tone offered him no crevice for an emotional appeal. She hadn't just departed. She had excised herself from his existence. He collapsed onto the bed, a king marooned in the cold expanse of his success. For the first time, Damien Vale, the man who had forged himself into an unbreakable fortress, felt the crushing weight of utter powerlessness. His phone vibrated. A text from Sienna, the other woman, materialized on the screen. So, how did it go? The casual venom in her question struck him with a sickening bolt of empathy, allowing him for a horrifying second to feel the same humiliation Clara must have endured. It was a stark portrait of his own insignificance to a woman for whom he felt nothing. He left the message unanswered. He sat in the hollow quiet, the ring cold in his palm, realizing at last he had mistaken the slow burn of his own ruin for a kind of liberation. Beyond the glass, the city lights shimmered, a galaxy of countless other lives. Every distant light was a life, a different decision, a separate fate. Within the silent mausoleum he had built for himself, Damien Vale finally grasped the true price of being untouchable, a terminal state of isolation. Sleep was an impossibility. He remained in the living room until the first hints of dawn, clutching the letter, watching the sky bleed from ink to slate. The morning's arrival felt like an act of exquisite cruelty. By 7 a.m., his phone held 23 messages from his staff and Marcus Chen, his second-in-command, who noted that for the first time in 2 years, Damien had missed their 6 a.m. strategy call. A final message was from Sienna. You've gone quiet. Did I finally get to you? He dismissed it with a swipe. His own calls to Clara were diverted to her voicemail, a cheerful ghost from a time when she might have wanted to hear his voice. "Hello, you've reached Clara. Please leave a message." The words he needed to say were trapped in his throat. "Clara, it's me. I have to explain." He ended the call, knowing he had nothing to offer. "Just call me back." An hour passed. Her line remained dead, a direct route to voicemail. By noon, he was stalking the perimeter of the vast apartment like a predator in a cage. The flawless architecture of his life had shattered. A monumental deal with the Castellano family, the culmination of months of effort, now seemed utterly meaningless. His thoughts kept returning to the tiny, folded garments as he acknowledged he couldn't recall the last time he'd asked his wife about her well-being. His phone rang, and a foolish flicker of hope that it was Clara was immediately snuffed out. It was Marcus. "Where on earth are you?" His deputy's voice crackled with urgency. "The Castellanos are seconds from walking. They see this as a profound insult." "Handle it," Damien said, his voice a dry rasp, and a stunned silence filled the line. In 5 years, Marcus had never received such a reckless directive. "Handle it how?" he questioned, his tone strained with disbelief. "I don't care. Give them the e-stocks. Give them anything they ask for. Just make it disappear." "Damien, what is happening? Are you all right?" "My wife left me," he stated, the words emerging flat and lifeless. "Sometime last night. She's gone." Another long silence stretched as Marcus, for whom Clara was only a name, struggled to process the information. "I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do for you?" "I need you to find her." "Understood. My people will be discreet. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" The question unearthed a void of ignorance, so vast it left him speechless. He knew none of her friends, nothing of her family, none of her sanctuaries. 7 months into their marriage, he was a complete stranger to her. "Her brother," he finally articulated. "Evan Hart. He lives somewhere in Riverside, I believe." "You believe?" "I have never been," Damien confessed, the admission tasting like powdered glass. "She once mentioned a house. It had a blue door." "That is not much to work with." "Then make it sufficient. That is what you do." He terminated the call, engulfed by a fresh wave of despair. He knew the fury he had just unleashed on Marcus was merely the poison overflowing from his own wound. He surveyed the penthouse, 4,700 square feet of cold, hard surfaces that now felt like a crypt. Every object, every chair, every piece of art had been selected to broadcast power, not to offer comfort. He recalled Clara's tentative early efforts to infuse life into the space, the plants he dismissed as clutter, the photographs that disrupted his sterile aesthetic. He had methodically rejected every attempt until she had simply ceased trying. At what point had he stopped seeing a person? His phone illuminated with a message from an unknown number. Evan Hart's message was brutally direct. Clara was secure. She had no desire to speak with him. All future communication regarding their child would be routed through her attorneys. He was to await their contact. Damien felt a surge of white-hot rage warring with an icy dread. His initial impulse was to believe she was hiding, using her family and lawyers as a barrier. But that was wrong. Her letter, her exit, it was all too deliberate, too composed. She was not running from him. She was erecting a fortress against him. Then the truth struck him with the force of a physical blow. Clara was not the issue. He was. His reply was a final, desperate gambit. "I have to see her, please, just 5 minutes." The answer was immediate. The text was cruelly concise. "She said you would ask." "The answer is no." His frantic follow-up? "This is my child, too," was met with a clinical retort. "You should have considered that before you sent the picture." Rage consumed him, and Damien hurled his phone against the far wall. The impact reverberated, but the device was unharmed, a reinforced piece of equipment, just as he liked things, built to endure, a standard he had tragically failed to apply to his own marriage. He retrieved it and typed a hollow apology. "Tell her I am sorry." Evan's response was surgical. "Tell her yourself, after you've learned to be a man and not just a monument." Those words found their target, shattering the armor he had so meticulously constructed. The man had been sacrificed to erect the mogul. As twilight began to seep into the penthouse, the walls seemed to press in on him. In a stark deviation from the script of his life, Damien walked out alone, without a driver, without security, without a plan. He simply dissolved into the city's bloodstream, his identity erased by the anonymous throng. No one deferred to him, no one spared him a second glance. The abrupt absence of reverence was a dizzying blow. He was just another soul caught in the Friday evening tide. The fall was terrifying, but in some strange way, it was also a release. His aimless journey concluded before a small diner, the very sort of establishment he was engineered to despise. And so this titan of industry, now utterly shattered, stepped into a humble diner, the kind with worn menus and a low hum from the lights, a place his wife Clara would have adored. Once inside, a weary waitress named Bonnie gestured with her pen. "Sit anywhere you like, hun. Coffee." He could only nod. She returned instantly, pouring from a battered pot without fanfare, her eyes appraising him. "Tough night?" A dry, rusted laugh almost escaped him. "You don't know the half of it." Her reply was practiced and calm. "Coffee helps with that. So does pie. We have apple or cherry." He heard his own voice request. Apple, though he could not recall the last time he'd eaten pie. His chef specialized in foams and delicate reductions. This was an act of rebellion. Bonnie returned with a formidable slice of pie, ice cream already melting down its sides. She refilled his coffee without a word before moving to another table. He took a bite. It was simple, sweet, and profoundly real, the most honest thing he had tasted in years. He then summoned the image on his phone, the digital bomb that had detonated his world. It was him and Sienna, their faces alight with a foolish, careless confidence. The timestamp was 10:47 p.m., a time when Clara would have been home, preparing for their child, waiting for him. The thought was a shard of glass in his soul. What kind of man sends that to his pregnant wife? A man who would rather be feared than loved. "Are you okay, dear?" Bonnie had returned, her face holding a genuine warmth he hadn't felt in an age. "My wife is gone," Damien heard himself say, the confession spilling out. "She left. I did something that can't be undone." Bonnie poured more coffee into his cup. "That's a very final word. I sent a photograph of me with someone else. Clara is 7 months pregnant." The compassion in Bonnie's gaze hardened into cold judgment. "Oh, honey, that's not a mistake you can walk back from." "I know. What possessed you?" He set down his silverware. "I was a fool who believed my power made me infallible. I thought I was invincible." "And now you've found the bullet." Bonnie leaned on the red vinyl of the booth. "My second husband was cut from that same cloth. Figured his money gave him a license to be cruel. Do you know where he is today?" "Where?" "Couldn't say. I haven't seen the man in 15 years. She pushed herself upright. The universe doesn't care about your net worth, hun. Sooner or later, it collects. She glided to another table, leaving him alone with his pie, his phone, and the complete wreckage of the only meaningful thing he had ever built. For 2 hours, he just watched others live their lives like a couple sharing fries. A woman sat reading in a booth. A man in work boots ate alone at the counter. They were just ordinary people, living ordinary lives, not consumed by building empires or proving their own myth. He paid Bonnie 3 times what he owed and vanished back into the night. That weekend became a frantic, sleepless spiral of failures. Flowers he sent to Evan's home were immediately sent back. When he went himself, Evan met him at the door with a baseball bat, the message perfectly clear. He called Clara's doctor, desperate for news about the baby. An impenetrable wall of patient confidentiality slammed the door in his face. Come Monday, Marcus was in the penthouse with files Damien was denied, his second-in-command's expression fraught with worry. "You look haunted," Marcus stated plainly. "I'm flattered." "When did you last sleep?" Damien waved the concern away. "What's the status on the Castellanos?" "To hell with the Castellanos. This is about you." A folder slapped the table. "I've been by your side for 5 years. I've watched you face down monsters, but now you're the one who's broken." "I'm fine." "No, you're not, and the vultures are circling." He displayed his phone, which was lit up with alerts. "The Southside crews are sensing weakness. The Morettis are testing our borders. 2 of our own suppliers are trying to leverage your situation. Let them try." "Damien, your authority is built on the myth that you are untouchable. The moment they find a crack, they will come to shatter you. You understand that." "I do." He covered his face. "I just don't have the capacity to fight a turf war right now." "Then what do you have capacity for?" "Bringing her home." The room fell into a heavy silence. "And if that isn't possible?" The question hung in the air like a toxin. His entire life was founded on the belief that anyone could be bought or broken. His whole world view reduced problems to equations solved with money, fear, or force. But Clara wasn't an asset to acquire. She was a human being he had pushed beyond her breaking point. "I don't know," Damien admitted, the words a quiet surrender. "Fine. I'll handle the territories while you sort this. But you need to choose, and quickly. This hesitation will destroy us. You either focus—" "Or what?" Marcus's expression was like steel. "Or you cede control. Let me or a council take over. You can't be a ghost in your own empire, Damien. This world will eat you alive." After Marcus left, Damien just stood by the window, watching the city breathe below. From 47 floors up, the city seemed simple. A board game he could win. Every issue was small, every consequence a distant theory. But down on those streets, Clara was forging a new life, one that didn't include him. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Speak." "Mr. Vale, this is Jennifer Reeves. I am Clara's legal representative." A shard of ice pierced his chest. "Is she all right? The baby?" "Both are in good health. I am calling to begin a conversation about a provisional custody agreement." "Custody is not on the table. I will speak to my wife." "Your wife has no desire to speak with you. She does, however, want to establish clear boundaries for your role as a father." The lawyer, Jennifer, spoke with a calm, unshakable resolve. "Is your schedule free for a meeting this week?" "I demand to see Clara." "That is not an option." "Then we have no options." His voice shifted, taking on the tone of command that bent powerful men to his will. My child's future is not a legal matter to be negotiated. If Clara has terms, she will deliver them to me in person. Mr. Vale, I recognize your distress, but threats and intimidation— This is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. Clara is my wife. The child is my blood. Her decision to leave is between us. She will not use you to erase me. She is not erasing you. She is protecting herself from you. The sentence landed like a physical blow. I am aware of what I did. Are you? Because your concern sounds more like a loss of control than actual remorse for the pain you've caused. For a brief instant, Jennifer's professional veneer frayed. Clara shared the photograph with me, Mr. Vale, and the note that came with it. She told me of the silence while you were busy with your empire. You must understand why a face-to-face meeting is not being considered. Damien squeezed his eyes shut. What are her terms? She requires that you keep your distance until the baby is born. She needs a calm setting to recover and give birth, one that is free from your particular brand of chaos. She will permit supervised visits after the delivery, governed by a strict protocol defining your access. Supervised, he thought, as if I'm a danger? At 10:47 p.m., you sent an image of your affair to your pregnant wife, Mr. Vale. If you don't call that an act of hostility, what would you call it? Damien was left suspended in the void of his own colossal failure. This is how we will proceed, Jennifer stated. I am sending a preliminary proposal. You will retain your own counsel. We will address this as adults, and if you have any fatherly decency, you will honor Clara's need for space. And if I refuse, then you will validate every negative belief she holds, giving Clara the legal leverage to all but terminate your parental rights. Jennifer's tone then shifted, softening with calculated precision. I've practiced this kind of law for 15 years, Mr. Vale. I know men like you, driven, successful, and certain of your own perfection. Some of them wake up before they lose everything. Others do not. The only thing that separates them is their character. The call disconnected before he could respond. Damien stared at the dark screen, at the reflection of a stranger, gaunt, weary, and hollow-eyed, a mockery of the flawless man he had so carefully constructed. Not 20 minutes passed before Jennifer's email appeared. As Damien read through the dense legal language, it carved a great canyon between his life and the words on the screen. Clara would be the sole primary guardian. He was offered supervised visitation every other weekend, conditional on his sobriety and emotional stability. The financial support was immense but insignificant to him. He was stripped of any say in his child's life, schooling, health, morality, unless Clara chose to include him. He was being made into a distant benefactor, a ghost with a chaperone twice a month. The proposal was a clinical masterpiece, a legal fortress, a weapon of psychological warfare. His first instinct was to scorch the earth, to unleash his own lawyers, to contest every single line, to use his money and power to frame Clara as an unfit mother and simply win. But then he saw the final clause. These terms are to protect the child from an unstable environment. If Mr. Vale demonstrates a sustained effort toward self-improvement and co-parenting, they are subject to review after the child's first birthday. A sustained effort? This wasn't a life sentence from Clara. It was a challenge to become a better man, and with that, his entire strategy collapsed. For 3 days, he had seen this as a war for power, a contest with a winner and a loser. This wasn't a contest, it was a final accounting. His pregnant wife had been collateral damage in his quest for more. The picture was an exercise in control. His empire was built upon the ruins of his marriage, and now Clara was wielding a weapon he'd never even acknowledged. She had chosen peace over his conflict, safety over his status, and her humanity over his power. Damien snapped the laptop shut, consumed by the silence of his gilded cage. Outside, the city was teeming. Inside, he was finally confronting the man he'd become. He was sickened by the reflection. His phone buzzed again, a text from Sienna. "Still in a mood? Don't be so tedious, Damien. It was just some fun. Don't let your wife's drama kill it." He read the message over and over. A week ago, Sienna's wildness had been magnetic. Her recklessness was a thrill. Her contempt for rules felt like freedom. Now he saw her with perfect clarity, a hollow person who collected powerful men like trophies, just to watch them fall. She wasn't attracted to him, but to the chaos, the victory, the grand theater of a titan's ruin. Damien severed the tie, blocking her number without hesitation. It was the smallest of gestures in the grand theater of his downfall. Yet it was the first authentic choice he'd made in ages. That night, Damien resurrected a long-buried right from his college years, the solitary pursuit of oblivion. This was not the sophisticated savoring of fine spirits, but the raw, punishing self-immolation of cheap whiskey consumed with purpose. He collapsed to the floorboards of his bedroom, resting against the bed frame, and systematically emptied a bottle of Jack Daniels while his thumb ghosted over the screen of his phone. He hunted for images of Clara. The archive was thin. He had ceased documenting their life together months ago. But a few artifacts from their beginning survived. Clara captured mid-laugh at a secret the world wasn't in on. Clara, radiant in a sundress at a friend's midsummer wedding. Clara passed out against his shoulder in the dark of a theater, her features softened with absolute trust. Where was the turning point? When had she shifted in his mind from his whole world to a line item on a balance sheet? He came across their wedding photos. A stark city hall affair, because a large ceremony was, in his words, a vulgar waste. Clara, in a dress from a department store, was luminous, with a joy so raw it was almost agonizing to witness. She had gambled everything on him, on their union, on what they could build. He had repaid her with a mansion filled with silence, a lonely pregnancy, and finally a photograph that incinerated what little faith she had left. His entire world, contained in the phone, slipped from a hand that had gone suddenly dead as the room began to dissolve around him. Shutting his eyes only amplified the vertigo. He forced them open, anchoring his gaze on the architecture of his gilded cage. The stark designer lighting, the flawless custom crown molding. In this penthouse, every surface was a testament to bespoke emptiness, a stark contradiction to the fraudulent existence he was leading. He surrendered to the darkness and awoke to the cruelty of morning light, his skull feeling as if it might split apart. His link to everything was dead, the phone screen a void. A bitter taste of bile and regret coated his mouth. His body screamed in protest after a night spent on hardwood that cost $300 a square foot. He stood under a torrent of water hot enough to scald, a desperate attempt to scour himself clean, as if the heat could somehow burn away the stain of his failures and the dread of a final separation. He emerged to find Marcus in his kitchen, a specter calmly brewing coffee. A ravaged voice croaked out how he had entered. "You gave me a key for emergencies," Marcus replied, sliding a mug over the island. This qualifies. I'm fine, came the reflexive lie. No, you're not, was the quiet rebuttal, but you're not dead, which we will count as a victory. Marcus filled in the blanks. I came by last night, found you unconscious on the bedroom floor. I nearly dialed for an ambulance. The question came out flat, hollow. What made you stop? You were breathing, Marcus answered, and I assumed you were engaged in a necessary civil war. Marcus held his gaze, searching for any sign that the self-inflicted storm had yielded some kind of clarity. Damien sipped the coffee, a punishingly black brew that served as a jolt from his own delusion. It produced a catastrophic headache, he said, and the piercing awareness that I am an absolute fool. A starting point, then, Marcus conceded, setting his own mug down. So, what is your next play? I'm signing the custody papers. Just like that? A complete capitulation. It is an acceptance of reality, Damien corrected, lowering himself onto a stool. Clara has every right to protect herself and our child from my poison. My own conduct confirms I'm a liability. She's creating a boundary, and I'm going to honor it. An eyebrow arched on Marcus's face. Who are you, and what have you done with Damien Vale? The construct known as Damien Vale, he answered, is the entire problem. Perhaps it is time for Daniel to reemerge. The name felt alien, an echo from a former self he had surgically excised, a man he'd deemed too sentimental, too vulnerable, too human. This, he now understood, was the fundamental error of his life. Very well, Daniel, Marcus said, testing the sound of it. What's the strategy? I don't have one, he admitted, but I know what it isn't. Daniel met his friend's eyes. I will not oppose her. I will not leverage my wealth to force her hand. Clara requested distance, and I will grant it while I learn how to become a man who is worthy of being in that child's life. And the company, you'll be the steward for the time being until I can rediscover myself, separate from the armor of invincibility. A profound silence settled between them. You are 100% serious about this. Entirely. The world will interpret this as weakness. Let it. Damien drained his coffee with a final resolute gulp. I have dedicated my life to building an impenetrable fortress, only to become its sole inhabitant. It seems embracing weakness might be the only path to salvation. After Marcus was gone, Damien composed a message to Jennifer Reeves. The words were spare and direct. I have reviewed the custody agreement. I accept all terms unconditionally. Please forward the final documents for my signature and convey to Clara that I am deeply sorry. Not as a plea for forgiveness, but as a statement of fact. I am sorry for all of it. He sent the email before his old instincts could stage a coup. He wandered through the opulent prison of his penthouse, his vision finally clear after months of blindness, seeing it for the sepulchre it was. The artwork she despised seemed to pass judgment from the walls, a silent jury of his failures. The furniture, designed to be admired, was cold and hostile to human contact. A kitchen equipped for a world-class chef was sterile, holding no memory of a shared meal, and the nursery, a perfect inviolate mausoleum for a life that would never be lived within its walls. This wasn't a home. It was a monument to a future he had murdered. Damien's hand found his phone, his voice toneless. Beth at Riverside Realty. I have a penthouse for sale. Within 48 hours, the monument was liquidated, sold in a frantic bidding war between three souls desperate to purchase their own piece of the sky, to gaze down from 47 stories and believed they had conquered the world. Damien disposed of the property with the chilling efficiency of a corporate demolition, accepting the first offer without a hint of negotiation. The agent Beth was professionally perplexed, almost alarmed by his flagrant disregard for profit. Her tentative question, "Are you entirely certain you don't wish to entertain other offers?" was met with a terse and absolute no. Inside him, however, a silent battle raged. The penthouse had become a chamber of psychological torment, its quiet amplifying the phantom of Clara's presence. The immaculate nursery stood as a gleaming, vicious tribute to his ruin. Even the skyline he once believed he commanded now only served to frame the crushing infinite scale of his solitude. So you have to understand, his friend Marcus perceives this entire affair as a complete psychotic episode, and the panic is plain to see. He's saying, "Friend, you liquidated the penthouse, you handed me the keys to the empire, and now you've vanished from the map." Damien chose some unremarkable coffee shop for their meeting, a significant descent from his usual towers of glass. On this neutral ground, he reveals he is on some kind of journey to rediscover himself. When Marcus bluntly accuses him of methodically destroying his own life, Damien's reply is a soft, "It would seem so." He even concedes the penthouse was merely a projection, a grand performance he now feels compelled to dismantle. "I am finished with projections," Damien announces, effectively executing his former identity. His grand strategy: relocating quietly to Riverside, a humble pilgrimage to re-enter the orbit of the woman and unborn child he abandoned. This revelation causes Marcus to practically inhale his espresso, the shock catching violently in his throat. The rationale was as simple as it was devastating. In the process of building an empire, he had burned down everything of actual value. The only path forward is to invert the very script of his life and reverse the toxic programming that led him here. Marcus spells out the inevitable consequences, noting that the predators are already circling. "They can smell vulnerability," he cautions. "The rumor is that you've abdicated the throne." Damien's reaction is a total rejection of that entire universe. Let them gossip. His objective has shifted from global domination to internal repair. In a final symbolic act, he requests to be called by his given name, Daniel. Marcus can only nod, but his expression betrays a truth Daniel is choosing to ignore. "You cannot simply wish away an empire, nor the enemies it created." He makes it clear this is not a capitulation, but a tactical withdrawal until he can forge himself into someone worth returning to. The act itself is a hard reset of his entire existence. Designer furnishings, invaluable art, a wardrobe filled with influence, all of it is purged from his life as if it were malware. The only items he retains are the bare necessities and a small collection of baby clothes, a fragile and sacred tether to his atonement. It is a deliberate demolition of his own ego, a prayer to become smaller, become quieter, become real. The new residence was selected for its excruciating normalcy, a standard house on a street where people simply existed. The soundtrack of suburbia, children's laughter, the barking of dogs, was so alien to his former sterile world that it felt strangely therapeutic. The moving company foreman surveys the modest house and his oversized truck, then smirks that it is a significant downgrade. The judgment of his past life could not be more apparent. But to Daniel, this felt like the first genuine promotion he had ever received. He arranged his meager possessions with the deep concentration of a monk, imposing a quiet order on the small dwelling. Following this, he enacted a rite of humility, consuming a cheap pizza on the bare floor. He would later reflect that this simple meal offered more nourishment than anything his private chef had ever crafted. It was never about the food. It was about laying a new cornerstone, an anchor to a normal existence he had only ever observed with disdain from his throne in the sky. Through his lawyer, Jennifer Reeves, he conceded everything: custody, a vast fortune wired directly to Clara. But the money was returned, an immediate and silent refusal. It was Clara's stark message that no sum could repair the world he had shattered. Daniel felt that rejection as a physical ache, a profound wound that brought clarity. She would not be purchased. She refused to be an entry on his ledger. He feebly tried to frame the transfer as a provision for their child, a thin veil for his own bruised ego. His quiet inquiries about Clara's condition met the unbreachable wall of attorney-client privilege. His lawyer then offered a chilling observation. For a man of his stature, such a complete surrender was deeply anomalous. This refusal to engage, to leverage his immense power, was a stark deviation from the archetype of a predator. The lawyer's final words, "That is significant," felt less like a legal opinion and more like a sliver of validation. He tried to articulate his transformation, a journey from a life of winning to a soul-deep need to be worthy. After the call, a feeling settled over him he could only name a fragile, terrifying hope, like a man long accustomed to darkness, seeing a distant light and fearing it's a final mirage before the end. The confrontation he knew was coming arrived in the form of Clara's brother, Evan Hart, a man radiating vengeance. His hatred was a tangible force as he challenged the sincerity of Daniel's change. Daniel's weak claim of being there for emergencies was demolished by one devastating truth. Clara had wept for 3 uninterrupted days after he vanished, forcing him to witness the true scale of the ruin he'd wrought. Evan condemned his return as a calculated performance, a strategic maneuver to reclaim a place in his sister's world. He saw it as a narcissist's desperate quest for a redemption story. Then came the ultimatum. If this is sincere, then leave. Prove you care by giving her the one thing you never did: space. And so the cruelest of traps was set. The only proof of his love was to utterly disappear from her life. Every predatory instinct screamed at him to retaliate, to argue, to dominate as he always had. But he silenced that internal roar, choosing her peace over his own desperate longing. His surrender came in a single, fractured word: okay. It was the most difficult and profound victory of his life. He confessed his love for her then with a new, brutal honesty, acknowledging it was both selfish and destructive. Daniel's quiet capitulation seemed to blunt the edge of Evan's rage, draining some of the poison. He then described the fractured state of Clara's mind, a soul trapped between the fear of future pain and the ghost of the man Daniel once was. She was caught in a trauma bond, unable to reconcile the tender past with the cruel present, leaving her spirit frozen and unable to heal. His protests were silenced by a brutal inventory of his neglect. Evan listed every meeting that took precedence, every unanswered call, every time his eyes had looked at Clara without truly seeing her. The final judgment was that he had made her feel invisible, a poison far deeper than simple abandonment. The truth struck Daniel with physical force. He had treated the woman he loved as an abstraction. A vow to change fell from his lips, the words feeling hollow even to himself. As he was leaving, Evan presented a final challenge, unearthing a relic from their past, a letter Clara had saved. Daniel's memory drew a complete blank. It was from the dawn of their love, Evan explained. A promise they had made. He told him that Clara grieves for the man who wrote that vow, not the titan he had become. The words sparked a desperate need in Daniel to find that forgotten piece of himself. Dated 4 years before, the letter was from a more vulnerable time. Even the handwriting felt like that of a less guarded man. It held a candid confession of his own shortcomings, followed by a solemn pledge. Clara, I know I'm not simple. I promise to choose you every single day. He signed it with his given name, Daniel. In that moment, the staggering depth of his failure became agonizingly clear. He folded the letter, placing it in his wallet as a tangible reminder of the man he was meant to be. The weeks that followed were a quiet education in anonymity. His new apartment was a sterile box, his career a hollowed-out shell. The profound silence of this new existence was a strange blend of peace and a persistent low hum of anxiety. He started to rebuild his world from simple routines, cleaning, reading, and learning how to be unseen in Riverside. This path of solitude eventually led him to therapy. The sessions took place in an impersonal office with Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 50s who regarded him with a calm, professional detachment. After the initial formalities, she went to the heart of it. What was he running from? He attempted to reframe his life as an act of creation, not escape. But Dr. Chen gently dismantled that narrative, suggesting his relentless ambition was the most elaborate escape of all. The work, she implied, was to discover what he was truly pursuing. The therapy sessions began to excavate his past, unearthing a deep-seated trauma born from a childhood of poverty. His parents' financial struggles had hardwired a terror of ever needing anyone. In response, he had built an empire as a fortress against vulnerability. In their 5th session, Dr. Chen asked about Clara. He admitted she had breached his defenses by simply seeing him, an experience he could only describe as terrifying. He confessed this terror stemmed from a core belief that he was unworthy of being loved. This fear had dictated his every action, to abandon others before they could abandon him. I made her invisible, he told the doctor, so she couldn't see me fail her. When asked about the photograph, he cited alcohol and control, but his doctor named it for what it was, a self-destruct button, pressed to force an ending he felt was inevitable. The revelation landed with the weight of an anvil. He asked her what he was meant to do now. Dr. Chen's prescription was radical acceptance, to own his actions and change for himself, not as a strategy to win Clara back. At the same time, his lieutenant Marcus reached out about the company, but the old fire within him was extinguished. When pressed, Daniel could only say, "My mind understands, but my heart is no longer in it." He admitted to his doctor that his pursuit of power was a catastrophic failure, and he was now in the process of erasing that identity. When asked who he was now, he simply said he was trying to find out. Then, 2 months after their separation, he saw her in a grocery store. There was Clara, 8 months pregnant, glowing with the tranquility he had never been able to give her. She was immersed in the simple task of choosing produce, an image so authentic it made his entire constructed life feel like a fraud. An overwhelming urge to go to her was stayed by the memory of Evan's warning. Watching from a distance, he could see she was genuinely at peace. In that moment, his need to possess her transformed into a profound gratitude. He finally saw that she hadn't rejected him. She had escaped him. He finally understood she had chosen a life of stability over his particular brand of chaos. With immense restraint, he waited for her to depart before he continued his shopping, a slight tremor in his hand. That night, he began a letter, weighing every single word. It began not with a plea, but with a statement. Clara, I saw you today. You looked happy. I am writing to let you know I am no longer the man who sent that picture. The letter chronicled his new reality. The penthouse sold, a new, smaller home, the start of therapy, and the seeding of his company. He wrote of his attempt to shed a false self for something real. He was clear that this was not a campaign to win her back, but an effort to become a man their child could respect, and to finally be worthy of the love she had offered. He signed it with his birth name, Daniel. He mailed the letter the next morning in a final act of release. 3 days later, an envelope bearing her handwriting was in his mailbox. The same tremor returned as he opened it. Her reply was a careful negotiation between a hope for his recovery and the deep skepticism his actions had warranted. She was not ready for trust, but she conceded Evan's belief that he was changing held some significance. Their child was due in 4 weeks. She wrote of her preparations, of her own mixture of joy and fear. She confirmed that she had always mourned the man he had once been, the one who wrote promises in letters. For the sake of their child, she hoped that man was not lost forever. Daniel read the note 5 times, absorbing every nuance. The message was unmistakable. Forgiveness was not on the table, but the door to a different kind of future was not entirely bolted shut. It was a grace he hadn't earned, but it was everything. He sent back a meticulously worded message. I will continue the work. I will not disappear. When the child arrives, I will accept any part you allow me, even if only financial. You are not enduring this alone. I am 5 minutes from you. For anything. Daniel. And so began their fragile correspondence. Brief, sterile updates exchanged between two souls navigating the wreckage of their past toward an uncertain dawn. Clara would write of strange cravings for pickles and ice cream. He would respond with tales of incinerated dinners and cooking lessons from the internet. She shared that the baby's kicks were most fierce in the dead of night. He confessed to buying a book on fatherhood, a guide he feared he might never have the chance to use. That photograph remained the silent specter between them, the ghost they dared not name. They spoke of neither divorce nor reconciliation, only of the baby. 4 weeks dwindled to 3, then 2. Daniel prepared his small apartment, gathering diapers and formula, assembling a crib that might forever remain unoccupied. Then, on a Tuesday at 11:30 p.m., his screen came to life. The name displayed was Evan. The world stopped turning for Daniel. Hello? It is time. Evan's voice was a wire pulled taut with panic. Her water broke. We are going to Riverside General. She asked me to call you. I'm on my way. In a single fluid motion, he was gone. A drive that should have taken 15 minutes became a desperate, white-knuckled 8. Every stoplight was a personal affront, every vehicle a foe. She asked me to call you. The phrase became his prayer, a fragile hope echoing in his mind. She could have simply erased his existence, relying only on Evan. But through all the heartache, the betrayal, and the profound silence, she had sent for him. The hospital's parking structure was a vast, dark chasm at that hour. Daniel abandoned his car in the nearest space, sprinting through the sliding doors into the bright, sterile shock of the lobby. A receptionist looked up, her expression one of utter boredom. Labor and delivery, Daniel panted, his lungs on fire. Clara Vale, my wife. The slow, deliberate clicking of her keys was a unique form of torture. 3rd floor, elevators to your left. Inquire at the nurse's station. Daniel was already in motion. The elevator's ascent felt like an eternity. Pausing on the second floor for a man wheeling an empty gurney, the third floor finally arrived. Its doors opened onto a hallway that smelled of bleach and consequence. Ahead, at the nurse's station, a young woman with a kind expression glanced up. "I am looking for Clara Vale. I am her." "My name is Daniel, her husband." The nurse consulted a chart. "She is in room 314. But, sir, for your own awareness, she is only at 3 centimeters. This may be a very long ordeal. First labors are often." "Time does not matter. I have to see her." The nurse's professional facade softened into compassion. "Room 314 is down the hall on your right. Her brother is with her. Be gentle, all right? The pain is quite severe." Daniel merely nodded, his legs feeling like they belonged to another man as he moved down the corridor. The door was ajar. He could hear Clara's voice from within, strained and thin with pain. "I cannot do this. Evan, I truly cannot. It is too much. You can. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You walked away from a man who did not deserve you while 7 months pregnant. You built an entire existence from nothing. You can absolutely endure this." Daniel was frozen at the threshold, trapped. An old, corrosive instinct urged him to charge in, to take command, to conquer her pain. But a newer, hard-won wisdom told him to seek permission first. He knocked softly. The voices inside ceased. Then he heard Evan. "Come on in." Daniel nudged the door open. The room was stark and impersonal. A hospital bed tethered to beeping monitors, Evan seated in a guest chair, a window overlooking the lot, and on the bed, Clara. You could already trace the lines of exhaustion carved into her features. Her hair was pulled away from a face pale, but for 2 flushed patches on her cheeks. She was dressed in a simple hospital gown, one hand resting protectively on her belly. When her gaze met his, an unreadable emotion flickered there. Was it solace or terror or something far too complex to name? "You are here." Her voice was a mere whisper. "You asked for me." Daniel lingered near the door, an intruder unsure if he had the right to cross into her world. "I will always come if you call for me." Evan got to his feet. "I am going to find some coffee. Give you 2 a moment." He stopped beside Daniel, his voice a quiet warning. "Do not make me regret this call." He departed, and for the first time in 3 months, they were completely alone. "How are you?" Daniel asked the question, and its utter inadequacy hung between them. A fleeting smile touched Clara's lips. "As if a tiny human is trying to claw its way free from my body. The contractions are around every 6 minutes. The doctor predicts a very long night." "May I?" Daniel indicated the chair Evan had vacated. "May I sit?" "Yes, please." He crossed the room with immense care, as if a single wrong step could shatter the delicate truce that held them. From this proximity, he could see the full report of her ordeal, the lines of tension around her mouth, the slight tremble in her hands. She finally acknowledged him, admitting, "I got your letters, every single one." Then she added, "I did not need a response. Just the knowledge you were thinking of me, of our baby." He interjected, "I know, but it was proof that I was trying." Just then, a contraction seized her, her body going rigid. Daniel watched, utterly helpless, as she began to breathe through it, counting low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The pain subsided, leaving her drained. "What do I do?" Daniel pleaded. "Give me a task." "There is nothing. You just have to wait. We both do." And then her eyes finally met his without a guard. It was a look completely unfiltered, the first he had received since his arrival. "You look different," she said. "I am." "Oh." He paused, trying to articulate 3 months of self-destruction and rebuilding. Therapy, a self-imposed exile, and the demolition of the great monument he had built to his own ego. "I sold the penthouse," he began. "I am in Riverside now. I gave Marcus complete control of the company. I began seeing a therapist 2 times a week, and I've been discovering that my ambition was just a way to run from myself." A true flash of surprise crossed Clara's face. "You are in therapy?" "For 2 months. It appears I have a mountain of work ahead." "Like what?" "Like constructing an entire empire as a shield because I was terrified of ever being weak again. Like vanishing on you because you saw the real man behind the armor, and that was more frightening than any corporate rival. Like sending that picture because a broken part of me wanted to burn it all to the ground before you could see you deserved so much better." His confessions hung in the quiet air between them, her expression revealing nothing. "My therapist, Dr. Chen, she says I am a work in progress," Daniel added. "That this is not a straight path, that I will fail. But I am trying, Clara. I am truly trying to become a man who is worthy of being this baby's father, and perhaps one day worthy of being your husband again." "Daniel!" Clara's voice was soft, the formal Damien shed for the name he craved. "I do not know if we can return to what we once were." "I know. I am not asking for that. I am asking if we can build something new." Before she could reply, another contraction consumed her. This one was ferocious. She gasped, her other hand gripping the bed rail. On pure instinct, Daniel reached out, taking her hand in his. She squeezed with incredible force, her nails pressing into his palm as the pain peaked. "Breathe," he said, his voice low and constant. "I am right here. You are safe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He counted along with her, his own heart pounding until it passed. When she finally relaxed, she did not let his hand go. "Thank you," she breathed. "Always." Evan reappeared with coffee, stopping in the doorway as he absorbed the scene. Their hands clasped together, a tentative, hopeful bridge spanning the chasm that separated them. "Another one?" Evan asked. "A strong one," Clara affirmed. "They are getting closer." Evan presented her with a small cup of ice chips. The nurse said these were permitted. No other food or drink until the baby is here. The next few hours dissolved into a surreal, timeless passage. Contractions arrived in relentless waves, each more intense than the last. A doctor would come and go, monitoring her progress like a technician. 4 centimeters. 5. 6. With each number, Clara's pain and exhaustion deepened. Daniel did not leave her side. Evan offered to relieve him so he could rest, but Daniel refused. Every time a contraction began and Clara's hand blindly sought his, he was there. Every time she needed ice, a cool cloth, or a voice to count with her, he provided it. Around 3 in the morning, at 7 centimeters and weeping from utter exhaustion and agony, she looked at him, her eyes completely undefended. "I am afraid," she confessed in a shattered whisper. "Of what?" "Of everything. The pain worsening, something going wrong, that I will be a horrible mother, that I'm going to face this all by myself." "You are not alone," Daniel declared, his voice filled with the certainty he felt deep in his bones. "I am here. Evan is here. You are loved, and you will be a magnificent mother." "How can you be so certain?" "Because you were strong enough to walk away from me just to protect this child." You sacrificed a world you built for a safe harbor. That shows you have the strength for parenthood's hard choices. A fractured laugh escaped Clara, thin and laced with unshed sorrow. What a bleak justification. It's the truth. His grip on her hand became a vice. Once our child arrives, the past is irrelevant. I'll handle the late nights, the doctor visits, anything you require. I will become the father I swore to be 4 years prior. That letter, Clara breathed, the memory hollow. I read it again. You vowed to pick me, always. And I shattered that vow, I know. Allow me to forge another, to choose you both forever. Before a response could form, the doctor entered. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a veteran in her 50s, possessed a practiced serenity born from weathering countless storms like this one. Let's see where we are, she stated, her tone steady as she pulled on sterile gloves. A brief examination was followed by a detached, professional smile. You've reached 10 centimeters, Clara. It's time to begin. The words hit the room like a physical blow, a tremor of pure terror. Clara's hand clenched Daniel's with crushing force. I'm not prepared. I can't. That's incorrect, the doctor countered with gentle firmness. Your body is prepared. The child is. Your mind just needs to catch up. Her gaze shifted to Daniel. Dad, are you remaining? But his entire world had already narrowed to Clara. Do you want me here? In the depths of Clara's gaze, fear and agony warred with a fragile glimmer of hope. Yes. Stay. I need you. Those words, I need you, were a seismic event, leveling the ruins of their past to lay a new foundation. I'm not going anywhere, Damien vowed, a commitment sealed in this crucible. Evan mirrored the action, positioning himself on her other flank. Staff moved with a practiced, fluid grace, a clinical ballet of machinery and purpose. Dr. Morrison assumed her post. Okay, Clara, with the next contraction, give it your absolute all. A profound, mighty push. Imagine the greatest exertion possible. In another setting, it could be a joke. In this room, it was visceral truth. When the pain crested, Clara complied, her face flushing a deep red as Damien counted out the agonizing seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Evan offered a steady flow of support from the opposite side. That was perfect, Dr. Morrison affirmed. Truly perfect. Recover your breath. We repeat the process with the next contraction. A raw, instinctual rhythm began to dictate the room. The wave, the effort, the release. Over and over, the pattern etched deep lines of fatigue onto Clara's features, every push feebler than the one before. Her hair was matted with sweat, the gown clinging to her skin, yet she persevered, fueled by a will to see her child that to Damien was legendary. The head is visible, the doctor declared. Clara, you're at the very end. A few more strong efforts. I can't, Clara wept, her voice fracturing. I have nothing more to give. It's too much. You can. Damien's tone was forged iron. Your strength eclipses anyone I know. You endured me. You endured abandoning me. You will endure this. Our baby is almost here. I need you to summon that power just once more. Her gaze found his through a veil of tears, a slow nod her only reply. As the next wave of pain crested, she pushed with the very last ounce of her being. There! Dr. Morrison shouted. The head is delivered. We just need the shoulders. A final, primal scream tore from Clara's throat, the sound of ultimate pain colliding with ultimate triumph. And then another cry echoed in the room, a newborn's first protest. You have a daughter, the doctor proclaimed, lifting a small, crimson, wailing infant. A daughter. With those words, the universe fractured. Everything that defined Damien, his dominion, his influence, his wealth, his very name, crumbled into insignificance before this fragile, wailing new life. His child, their child. The staff worked swiftly, cleaning the infant before placing her onto Clara's chest. Her cries subsided into soft murmurs, silenced by the rhythm of the heart she'd known for 9 months. Clara's hands rose to cradle her, a torrent of tears, of agony, ecstasy, and profound relief streaming down her cheeks. "Hello, my love," Clara murmured. "We've been so eager to meet you." Damien stood motionless, his breath caught in his throat. He watched them, the woman he loved and the child they made, and felt the core of his being irrevocably altered. This wasn't the breaking he'd known when Clara walked away. This was a fundamental reconstruction, a reset of the soul. "Would you like to cut the cord, Dad?" A nurse offered, extending the scissors. Damien's gaze sought Clara's, asking for permission. She answered with a tear-streaked nod. With a trembling hand, Damien severed the lifeline that had bound his daughter to her mother for 9 months. A nurse took the child, reciting figures that were nothing but static in his ears. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 20 inches long, perfect assessments. Then she was returned to Clara's arms, swaddled in pink, her features wonderfully compressed. "She has your nose," Clara breathed, "and your stubborn jawline. But her eyes are yours," Damien countered softly. "Look at them." Evan, recovering from his own emotional moment in the corner, approached the bed. "She's incredible, Clara. You are amazing." "We were amazing," Clara corrected, her gaze boring into Damien. "Every one of us." After completing her work, Dr. Morrison discreetly withdrew. "I'll leave you to it. My sincerest congratulations." In their solitude, the 4 of them, a profound, almost sacred stillness descended. The baby made soft sounds, acclimating to this new world. Clara, exhausted but radiant, kept a protective hand on their daughter. "Have you two considered a name?" Evan ventured. "I made a list," Clara confessed. "But now that she's here, nothing feels right." Her eyes then settled on Damien. "What do you think?" And there it was, a leap of faith, an invitation back in. A door nudged ajar. "What about Emma?" he offered quietly. "It signifies whole, all-embracing, entire." Clara mulled over the sound, her focus never leaving their child. "Emma Vale." At last, a genuine smile illuminated her face. "I love it. Her name is Emma." As if on cue, the baby, Emma, gave a wide yawn, the very image of tranquility. At that moment, an emotion long foreign to Damien struck him like lightning. Not dominance, not victory, but love. Raw, unconditional love. "Could I?" he started, his voice cracking. "Could I hold her?" Clara studied his expression, searching for something deep within him. Apparently, she found it. With gentle care, she transferred the warm, tiny infant to his arms. The baby's weight was both negligible and infinite. Damien cradled her against his body, paralyzed by a fear of doing it wrong, captivated by her flawless fingers and her innate trust. "Hello, Emma," he murmured. "I am your father, I swear to you. I will be better for you than I was for your mother. I will be present. I will be constant. I will love you with a ferocity that leaves no room for doubt." The tears began to fall freely down his cheeks. He made no move to stop them. Let the armor he wore for years corrode and fall away. Let him be vulnerable for this small being who would never care about his influence, his wealth, or his command. She would only ever need him, and he would not fail her. Ever. Daniel, Clara's voice was quiet. He raised his head to meet her unreadable gaze. Thank you, she continued, for showing up, for staying. It doesn't solve everything, I know, but it matters. I will continue to be here, Damien promised, as long as you allow it. Evan coughed lightly. Right, I'll give you some space. Call if you need me. He placed a kiss on Clara's brow, gave Emma one last look of wonder, and then quietly departed. Now alone with Clara and their child, Damien eased into the chair beside her bed, never loosening his grip on Emma. She was already sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. She's perfect, he repeated in a hushed tone. Yes, she is. Clara observed them for a long moment. For months I was consumed with rage. I planned to erase you, to raise her entirely on my own. You would have been justified. Perhaps. Then your letters began to arrive. Evan mentioned you were in Riverside. Then I spotted you in the market, looking completely bewildered in the produce aisle. The faintest hint of a smile graced her lips. You seemed so ordinary, so real. Not the powerful man who broke me, just Daniel, the man I truly loved. A knot formed in Damien's throat. I'm working my way back to him. I see you're trying, but Daniel, understand this. Her voice became hard as stone. I will not go through this again. I will not be your second choice. I will not come after your business. If you want to be a part of her life, of our life, everything must change. It will. I've already begun making changes. Beginnings are easy. Following through is the challenge. Clara moved, a sharp intake of breath escaping her. I must have your word that when things get difficult, when your empire beckons, when that power feels seductive, you will choose us. Every time. This isn't about tonight with our child, she began. It's about a month, a year, and 10 years from this moment. I will be there. You swore that once before, in your letter. I know, he admitted, his voice thick with failure. I don't deserve your trust. His eyes fell to Emma's slumbering form. But I'm asking for it. Let me earn it. We don't need a marriage or a shared home, just two people dedicated to this little girl. Allow my actions, not my words, to prove I have changed. An eternity passed in Clara's silence. What would that look like? I'm staying at my house in Riverside. And so, Damien presented the conditions of his surrender. His redemption would not be paved with grand declarations, but with the quiet daily commitment of being a father. He would restore their bond simply by being present, unfailingly. In exchange, Clara insisted he abandon his old weapons, his fortune and his sway. He conceded. From then on, his only real asset would be his dependability. The image of him, a father keeping watch in the dark, finally breached her defenses. A faint glimmer of belief was born. The infant, Emma, was then placed back in her mother's embrace. The instant Clara held her daughter, a strange peace descended upon the room. He offered the name Grace, an obvious prayer for the absolution he hadn't earned. Clara heard the performance beneath his words. A long quiet stretched between them as the gravity of their fragile new arrangement took hold. A family had just been created in a fog of uncertainty, moments before the nurses bustled in, breaking the fragile spell. For a day or two, the hospital was a well-appointed prison, its schedule dictated by visiting hours. The policies granted Damien a 24/7 pass. But he played his hand carefully, ceding the choice to Clara. a calculated gesture in a conflict he was already losing. After a silence heavy with their painful history, she agreed. He witnessed the first feeding and the first checkup, questioning the physician on sleep cycles and infant digestion with the intensity of a prosecutor. He maintained a sleepless vigil, a protector startled by every sound from the cradle. In the pale blue light of dawn, he made a quiet promise to the newborn, a vow to remake himself for Clara. He mapped out a new world with the child at its core, where his empire would crumble in the face of love. When her tiny hand curled around his finger, he felt not a simple reflex but a pardon being issued. This was his forge, an opportunity to melt down the husband he was and recast himself as a father. The initial 2 weeks were a hazy ordeal of exhaustion and fumbling experience. With Clara recovering separately, he began his new routine, arriving at 7 a.m. daily with meticulously chosen provisions. His hands, once instruments of command, were learning the gentle skill of caregiving. He ran interference, shielding Clara from the baby's demands so she could heal. A third party, Evan, observed with deep suspicion, anticipating the moment the monster would reappear. But the formidable tycoon was gone, replaced by a weary, unkempt parent humming fragments of lullabies. When Evan confronted him during a 6 o'clock feeding, Damien credited the transformation solely to the child. In time, he started including Clara's name in his list of motivations. Evan cautioned that forgiveness was a territory she might never allow him to enter again. Damien affected a patience he did not possess, professing he only wanted to remain in her orbit. The harsh cycle of childcare and business became his new discipline, with the role of the perfect father his only road to redemption. After 3 weeks, she asked to inspect his home. She framed it as a logistical inquiry, a prelude to discussing custody arrangements. A profound dread settled over him, but he consented immediately. He watched her arrive the next day, moving with their child in a fluid, practiced grace. This maternal version of her erased the memory of the tragic beauty he once controlled, compelling him to redefine his understanding of possession. He opened a door before her hand could touch it, a frantic energy just beneath his composed surface. The apartment was a stark cell compared to the palace they had shared. Yet at its center was an impeccably prepared nursery, a shrine constructed as tangible proof of his commitment. This, he clarified, was to demonstrate he could be trusted with their child's care alone. He presented the safe house. It was secure and nearby, nothing more. She surveyed the space, discovering his new father kit, cookbooks and parenting guides. In the bedroom, an old photograph of them from before the fall was purposefully displayed. The moment she saw it, he began a rehearsed monologue about his lost priorities. The baby's cry was his signal, and he led Clara into the nursery, a room seemingly staged for this very confrontation. As she fed their child, the feeling of home struck him with force. Then she shattered the illusion, attacking him by exposing a devastating lie connected to a different photograph from their shared history. He sank to the floor in a dramatic gesture of submission as he confessed everything. He cited alcohol and a toxic need for control, even mentioning a therapist to lend credence to his self-diagnosed fear. He described a powerful man concealing a frightened boy, convinced she would leave if she ever saw his true self. But Clara saw his tactic for what it was, a preemptive move to retain control. And to her shock, he instantly agreed, a cunning maneuver designed to feign honesty. With the baby now quiet, he admitted the damage was irreversible, but then attempted to look toward the future, deflecting the gravity of his past actions. Clara concluded the exchange with a long, cold assessment of the staged room. The Spartan nursery became her courtroom. Clara put his entire metamorphosis on trial, demanding concrete evidence beyond his flawless fatherly act. He consented to her complete oversight of his life. She observed his remote therapy sessions and noted his scrupulous financial management. A stark contrast to the man who once wielded money as a weapon. She watched him fail spectacularly at cooking, a near smile appearing when he charred a portion of their meal. His personal chef, a relic of his former power, was conspicuously absent. The atmosphere was broken by the arrival of his chief lieutenant, Marcus, who was visibly stunned by how far his boss had fallen. Asked if he was losing his grip, Damien just looked at Clara and said he was finally finding it. He explained it to Marcus. This new existence might seem like a complete breakdown, but he wasn't losing his mind, he insisted. He was discovering his soul. The entire criminal enterprise, with all its power and violence, had been a grand distraction. This quiet, small existence with Emma was the only thing that was real. His sole purpose now was to build a future for his daughter. He then risked asking if they could begin to repair what he had destroyed. Her response was a storm of conflicting feelings. She was still seething from the hurt he'd inflicted, yet disarmed by his unwavering, quiet dedication. The question lingered. Was this real, or was it merely his most sophisticated manipulation to date? He acknowledged that no grand act could prove his sincerity. Only his presence, day after mundane day, could suffice. That was his only offer. Clara gazed at their sleeping child, a daughter who needed a father who chose her unconditionally. He vowed he would become that man. "And what of me?" she asked. He replied, "A partner who is present and who chooses you." He confessed he couldn't promise flawlessness, only his effort. And with that, her walls finally gave way. The grief for the life they had destroyed erupted, exposing the raw agony of his betrayal. He knew sorry was insufficient, but it was a beginning. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only for a probationary period, a chance to show he had changed. The months passed, measured by Emma's developmental milestones. Damien's presence was a steady, constant force. He appeared for every single achievement, chronicling his daughter's life. Gradually, Clara's defenses began to lower, allowing him further into the delicate new world they were constructing together. She began speaking of her own ambitions again, considering a return to her university program. He offered his complete and total encouragement. When she noted her field was psychology, he quipped that she was skilled at analyzing people. "Everyone but you," she countered. He conceded he was a master of concealment, and that she had always been too willing to find the good in him. He was determined to help her return to her studies, framing it as restitution for his past neglect. Their quiet conversation was shattered by a phone call from Marcus. A rival organization, the Castellanos, had offered to buy out his entire network. The price was $60 million. Damien absorbed the news while watching Clara and Emma play in the yard. When he sought Marcus's counsel, his lieutenant said the old Damien would have responded to this proposal with violence. He advised him to accept the offer. Damien's voice was empty as he affirmed that man was truly gone. "Liquidate everything," he commanded. "Dispose of it all." He called the Empire a magnificent, fatal tumor he could only recognize after it had ruined all he held dear. The agreement was finalized 3 weeks later. With a single signature, Damien ceded his entire enterprise to the Castellanos. He divided the proceeds. Half was placed in a trust for Emma, a quarter was donated to charity, and the remainder he kept to build a new life. He then called Clara, inviting them to a simple dinner he termed a celebration, a funeral for his fallen kingdom, and a christening for his new beginning. Clara accepted on the condition the venue was modest. They convened in a quiet Italian place, a phantom limb of a family. Damien confessed to liquidating his entire world, speaking of a release so profound it felt as if a physical burden had vanished from his soul. He laid out his plans for the proceeds. Clara had to know, was he truly at peace with it all gone? The influence, the dread? Utterly, he confirmed. That existence was nothing more than a grotesque charade. This, he gestured to their shared table, was the only truth he had left. This was truth. Clara's hand drifted across the table, her fingers finally bridging the chasm between them. The contact sent a shockwave through his entire being. She told him she was proud of the man he was forging himself into. He had to ask if this changed anything. "It means I'm prepared to see what we can create," she answered. A simple act of co-parenting unfolded, and its unadorned grace left him completely staggered. He understood then that this bond was the one treasure his fortress of power could never secure. A bond, a presence, a love. 6 months passed, and Clara took up residence in his riverside home. This was no passionate reconciliation. It was a stark, pragmatic contract to rebuild from the bedrock, guided by therapy and deliberate action. They were simply two parents learning to function as a unit. She bled color and vitality into his sterile domain, transforming the structure into a sanctuary. Emma's room became a perfect haven. Their weekly therapy felt like an excavation, methodically clearing the ruins of their past to lay a new foundation. There were therapy sessions that concluded in tears, but they never once considered skipping them. It was their unspoken pact to mend, not to shatter again. For Emma's first birthday, they hosted an intimate gathering. Marcus appeared, remarking that Damien had to sacrifice his entire kingdom just to find a measure of peace. "Look at you," he said, watching Damien assist the baby with her cake. "A year ago, you commanded the world. Now you're wearing frosting and your smile is genuine." "The best transaction I ever closed," Damien replied, gently wiping his laughing daughter's face. He wasn't referring to the sale of his empire, but to its demolition, the act of building something new from the wreckage. Later that evening, after the guests departed, they watched the sunset. The silence wasn't void, it was charged. "I've been contemplating," Clara began. "About what?" "Us, this thing we are constructing." She met his gaze directly. "I believe I am ready." "For what?" "To honor our vows, not as partners in parenting, as a true marriage, indivisible and complete." The air caught in Damien's throat. "Are you certain you can truly see that?" "I can. I've witnessed the evidence every single day for a year. I watched you endure the arduous work. You demonstrated that a man can, in fact, change." A faint smile graced her lips. "I believe the man I once loved has returned. Or perhaps this is someone new. Regardless, I am ready to build my life with him." Damien reached for her, and she melted into his embrace. They clung to one another as the sun bled away, both understanding this fragile peace was his only authentic victory. And so it was. Two shattered souls attempting to piece each other back together, forging a genuine family from the illusion of one. Damien laid it bare. "My love for you is real now, not the obsessive madness from before, but the stable, foundational code for the man I'm striving to be." And Clara, delivering the final verdict, whispered, "I love you too, and I forgive you. For everything, you are absolved." Her words released a year of compressed anguish within him. He did the labor to prove he'd changed. She offered him the one thing he could never earn: grace. 6 months on, they were renewing their vows in the garden with little Emma toddling between them. This wasn't for an audience. It was a solemn pledge to be true partners in the grind of every day. "I promise to truly see you," Damien vowed, holding her hands. "To choose you, to build this with you, not just beside you, and to never flee when it becomes difficult." Clara responded, tears tracing paths down her face. "I promise to trust you again, to catch you when you stumble, to be your equal, and to choose love over fear always." Evan, the eternal skeptic, presided over the ceremony, his doubt utterly dismantled by the proof before him. Marcus stood as a witness, stunned by Damien's complete spiritual overhaul. Then Emma, just 18 months old and oblivious to the gravity of the moment, spoke her first clear word. "Da, da." Damien swept her into his arms, holding his daughter while kissing his wife, a palpable sense of his soul finally rebooting correctly. It was never about the power or the money, but about the profound sense that he had salvaged the only thing of value from his own self-made disaster. In the years to come, Damien would reflect on the night of that photograph as the detonation that both annihilated and recreated him. It sundered every life it grazed, but it also incinerated the monster he had become, forcing a brutal rebirth. He channeled his strategic mind into a foundation for families crushed by poverty. Clara earned her degree, opening a practice to help women heal from betrayal. Emma grew up with a father who was a constant presence, learning that true strength lies in reliability, not in control. At times, Damien would recall his phantom empire and the man he had to metaphorically kill to be worthy of love. He would think of the self-portrait that set off his spectacular downfall and feel a strange gratitude. That singular act of hubris taught him the most vital lesson. You can conquer the world and still possess nothing. To be untouchable is to be utterly alone. Real power isn't commanding legions, but having the courage to connect when your own demons scream for you to retreat. It is the will to rebuild a self from the rubble of your own failures. Damien Vale had been the master of a dynasty built on fear. Daniel Vale was a husband and a father who learned the only conquest that matters is the one over oneself. And as he drifted to sleep beside the woman he had nearly discarded, and the life he almost erased, he knew with absolute certainty which man he was. The choice had cost him a world of smoke and mirrors, and in its place, it gave him everything that was 100% real.
Lesson: the real villain move was not cheating, it was turning another person's heartbreak into a personal flex. This story absolutely cooks because it understands one brutal thing about human failure. The worst decisions are often made by people who think they are still the smartest person in the room. Damien Vale had everything the alpha empire builder fantasy promises. Money, yes. Penthouse in the sky, yes. Reputation big enough to enter a room before he did? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Clara had the thankless role that high achievement men love to undervalue until it is too late. She was holding the emotional architecture together. She was home, pregnant, folding baby clothes, setting the table, maintaining the illusion that they were still a couple instead of a legal arrangement with expensive lighting. So right away, the plot does something sneaky. It tells the audience that the marriage is not broken by the photo. It is broken by repetition. The photo is just the jump scare. Then enters Sienna, who is basically chaos in human form, not because she uses a weapon, but because she knows exactly which emotional wire to cut. She does not beat Damien with logic. She beats him with ego management. She studies him for 2 minutes and realizes this man would rather detonate his own life than be called afraid. And that is the funniest, saddest thing in the entire setup. He has probably survived gang wars, boardroom ambushes, and loyalty games, but one woman goes, "What, scared?" and his brain logs off. He sends the picture. Pause there because that is the actual horror beat. Not infidelity, not drunken stupidity. The horror is that he uses Clara's nervous system as a stage. He converts her pain into proof of self-image. He does not merely betray her, he makes her witness the betrayal on purpose. That is not romance gone wrong. That is ego weaponized. Which leads to the first major life lesson. There is a huge difference between making a mistake and performing disrespect. A mistake hurts, a performance humiliates. Clara's response is why the story hits emotionally instead of collapsing into soap opera. She does not throw herself into dramatic revenge mode. She does not stay to explain her humanity to a man who just announced he had stopped valuing it. She leaves, quietly, cleanly. Ring on the pillow, letter on the bed, dignity packed before dawn. That move is devastating because it flips the power structure. Damien expected himself to be the active force and Clara to be the emotional aftermath. Instead, she becomes the author of the next chapter. She does not scream, "How could he?" She answers, "He could." Therefore, she leaves. That is a grown person decision, and it lands harder than any tantrum ever could. Now the script pulls a beautiful irony. Damien finally gets what he thought he wanted. Freedom, silence, no demands, no emotional accountability, no wife asking where he has been. And the second he gets it, the penthouse turns into a gilded coffin. Suddenly the marble is cold, the art is stupid, the nursery is haunted. His empire cannot hold him at night. Because here is the rule this story keeps repeating. Comfort is not intimacy and status is not companionship. Then comes the redemption arc, and this is where a lot of stories cheat. They usually give the guy one rain-soaked apology, one speech, one near-death realization, and boom, healed. Not this one. This story says, nope, bro can cry, but bro still needs to make bottles at sunrise. That is why the arc works. He downsizes. He signs the custody papers instead of playing lawyer chess. He goes to therapy. He moves closer. He learns how to cook like a normal struggling human. Most importantly, he stops auditioning for redemption and starts practicing it. That distinction is everything. Auditioning says, look how much pain he is in. Practicing says, he is here again at 7 in the morning. And Clara, to the story's credit, does not become sentimental just because he is suffering. She does not confuse regret with reliability. She watches, she tests, she waits, she lets time do what tears cannot. That is life lesson number 2. Trust does not come back because the guilty person feels bad. It comes back because the injured person observes a long enough pattern of safety. Then Emma is born, and the whole script pivots from high-rise tragedy to humble miracle. Suddenly, the man who once thought he needed to be feared is learning how to hold a newborn like his own hands are too clumsy for grace. He counts contractions. He stays through the night. He changes diapers. He becomes, and this is the plot's secret joke, more powerful when he stops trying to look powerful. That is the emotional kill shot of the story. Because the old Damien believed scale created meaning. Bigger building, bigger empire, bigger name, bigger fear. But Emma reduces life back to its irreducible truth. A baby does not care how many men obey her father. She cares whether he comes when she cries. Clara does not need a king. She needs a partner who remembers the pediatric appointment and shows up with coffee. So the entire narrative becomes a demolition of false masculinity. Not masculinity itself. False masculinity. The kind that thinks silence is strength, distance is leadership, and emotional cruelty is proof of independence. The story tears that idea apart and replaces it with something much harder. Real strength is repetitive tenderness under conditions of exhaustion. By the time Damien sells the empire, the audience understands that the external action is just the physical version of an internal surrender. He is not giving up. He is finally choosing substance over theater. He is trading image for intimacy. And somehow, hilariously and beautifully, the man gets richer the moment he stops trying to look rich in the ways that matter. Last life lesson then. The opposite of arrogance is not humiliation, it is responsibility. He does not become worthy because he suffers. He becomes worthy because he keeps showing up after suffering stops being dramatic and starts being domestic. He earns back possibility one mundane action at a time. That is why the ending works. Clara does not return because the old spark magically reignites. She returns because the man she loved becomes visible again through behavior. Not all at once, not cleanly, but steadily. So yes, the hook is that the most dangerous man in the city lost everything because of one photo. But the deeper cut is this: he was never destroyed by scandal. He was destroyed by the belief that another person's heart existed to absorb the consequences of his ego. And he was only saved when he learned the one skill his empire never taught him: how to love someone in ways that are too ordinary to brag about and too faithful to fake.